Today's vocab lesson is on lesson 5, and these words are all about joining. We're on page 29 of your workbook, and this lesson is going to be a little bit different because instead of requiring you to do a certain vocab strategy to help you study, you actually get to choose which of the 4 strategies you would like to use. So you need to have out your root card because we will be adding to that. And then you need whatever materials are necessary to complete your choice of vocab strategy. Just as a reminder, there are 4 different strategies that you can complete, but you have to complete one of the 4. The first is note cards, and I have a reminder here about the format of the note cards. You must make the note cards in this format if you choose to use this strategy. The second option is the blue vocab connection chart where you're writing down the word, the definition, the root, and then you're making a connection. It could be either a literature connection, a personal connection, or a world connection. Your third option would be to use the pink vocab visual squares. Remember, these are intended to be cut out with the word and the picture on the front, and then directly on the back, the definition, the root, and an explanation of your image. And your fourth and final option would be the yellow word pyramid sheet, where you're coming up with synonyms and antonyms for each of the words. So whichever of these 4 you choose, make sure you have the appropriate materials before continuing on with this lesson. The first root that we're going to learn in lesson 5 is cum, and cum means with or together with. So please add this root definition to your root card. And again, this is lesson 5. The first word that we're going to look at that uses this root is coherent. Now, just from hearing that word, you probably noticed that cum, C-U-M, is not actually represented in the word coherent. I just want to make a note that a lot of times cum becomes co, C-O, often with the addition of an L, M, N, or R, and you'll see that as an example in many of the words that we learn in this lesson. So I just wanted to make a note that the actual letters C-U-M do not appear in most words that actually use this root. The spelling changes a little bit. So for coherent, we have the C-O-H root. And don't forget to add this word to whichever vocab strategy you have chosen. Coherent is an adjective, and it has 2 definitions. It can either mean showing an orderly fashion or relation of parts, or sticking together. Write down both of these definitions because it may be represented on your quiz either way. Using this word in a sentence, it looks like this. It was tough to listen to my little brother as he couldn't tell a coherent story to save his life. Another example that comes from your workbook, a honeycomb is a coherent structure of beeswax and honey. So that second sentence uses the second definition, sticking together, whereas the first sentence shown here uses the first definition, which is showing an orderly fashion or relation of parts. Remember, if you need to pause the video at any point to continue to fill out your vocab strategy, please feel free to do that. But we're going to move on to the second word, which is pronounced colloquial. Again, you do not see the C-U-M spelling for the root cum. Instead, we have co with an L. Don't forget to add this word to your vocab strategy. It is also an adjective. And the definition is characteristic of ordinary conversation rather than formal speech or writing. So colloquial describes writing or speech that is conversational or casual, as shown in the text messages being sent back and forth in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. This word used in a sentence, it is acceptable to speak in a colloquial manner when with your friend, but not when giving a speech in class. The third word that we're going to learn today is commiserate. Again, C-O-M is the root here, not C-U-M, which is shown on the root slide. It's a verb, and this word is almost always followed by the word with. So that's a kind of clue that you might want to jot down on your vocab strategy. It means to feel or express sorrow or pity. So used in a sentence, after the loss, fans commiserated with each other to ease the pain. So notice even in that sentence, with comes after commiserate, and this is often the case. Following the assassination of President Kennedy, hundreds of people sent poems and letters to the newspapers as a way to commiserate with the nation, is the sentence from your book. The fourth word that uses this root is condone. Condone is a verb, and it means to forgive or to disregard an offense. Used in a sentence, while I don't always like it, I do condone chewing gum in class, meaning I forgive it or I disregard it or ignore it when it's done in the classroom. Please feel free to pause, but we're going to move on to the fifth word, which is commodious. Commodious is an adjective, it's a describing word, and it means spacious or roomy, especially in relation to a house. So oftentimes the word commodious refers to or describes a house. After spending years living with her little sister, Steph was given the commodious upstairs bedroom to herself, the spacious or roomy bedroom. Mount Vernon, which we are actually going to see when we travel to Washington, D.C., is George Washington's house, and it is a commodious dwelling having spacious rooms with high ceilings, which you'll actually get to experience. The sixth and final word that uses this root is contrite. Contrite is an adjective, and it means thoroughly remorseful and repentant of one's sins. So it basically means to be sorry, which is shown in the picture on the screen here. Used in a sentence, after the lashing from his parents, Sammy was very contrite around his brother. So as you probably have noticed, all 6 words that we have just reviewed start with C, and actually they all start with C-O. So it'd probably be a good idea to come up with some sort of strategy or way to remember the difference between these words. I would try and come up with some clues or hints, look for ways in which the words are spelled to help you remember what their definitions are, because I know from experience that it's very difficult to remember and keep straight all of these different words that have such close spellings. And if you need help with this, of course, you can ask one of your teachers. We have lots of tricks and hints for how to remember these definitions. We're going to move on to the next root. This is actually the only other root that we're going to be working with in this lesson. There are 4 words that use this root, so there will be a total of 10 words by the time this lesson is done. The root is teneo, and it means to hold or to keep. So please add this to your root card. Just a reminder, even though the words reset in lesson 5, meaning that this quiz that you're going to take only will have lesson 5 words, the same is not true for the roots. You still need to know all of the roots from the beginning of the year, lessons 1 through 5. The words, however, have reset, so you only need to know the lesson 5 words. The first word that uses this root is abstain. Abstain is a verb, and it means to refrain from something by one's choice. Used in a sentence, you should abstain from having your phone, TV, or computer on while reading or doing homework. So you should refrain from it. You should try not to do it. Doctors advise pregnant women to abstain from smoking and drinking alcoholic beverages, which can damage the fetus, is the sentence from your book. And we are now on page 31 if you're following along. The next word that uses this root is impertinent. Impertinent is an adjective, and it means rude or irrelevant. Please make sure you write down both of those definitions because both may be represented on your quiz. In a sentence, one impertinent behavior at the table is chewing with your mouth open. So as you can see, the sentence that's listed here uses that first definition, which means rude. But it can also be used to describe something that's irrelevant, which is shown in the picture here on the bottom. It's definitely irrelevant for this man to be using a hairbrush. Two more words for this lesson. The next word is pertinacious. Again, this is an adjective and it means holding firmly, even stubbornly, to a belief. Now, the key here, what you definitely need to write down, is the last part of that definition, to a belief. And that will become, it'll become apparent why that's an important part of this definition when we learn our last word. But pertinacious, again, means holding firmly or stubbornly to a belief. The pertinacious lawyer stuck with his client for over a decade in order to exonerate him in court. The next word has a very similar definition. The word is tenacity. It is a noun, and it means hanging on to something persistently or stubbornly. Used in a sentence, even though I spun her in circles, the puppy's tenacity prevented her from letting go of the rope. Now you'll notice a difference in the definition between tenacity and pertinacious is that pertinacious is talking about holding on to a belief, whereas tenacity is holding on to an actual object. So make sure you know the difference between those two definitions. Also, to help you out, pertinacious is an adjective, so it will always function as a describing word in a sentence, whereas tenacity will function as a noun. At this point, you should have 10 words filled out on whichever vocab strategy you have chosen, and you should also have the 2 new roots from Lesson 5 written on your roots card.